Main Issues is a daily program throughout the week from Mondays to Fridays. We have daily main issues, and on main issues we discuss cogent programs, cogent issues. And this afternoon we have a very big analyst in the house who's going to talk about something very, very, very germane that affects both the local and the city. He's going to be enlightening us on major things in the electricity sector. And I have with me this afternoon in the house Engineer Barka Sajo, the Executive Director, Technical Services, Rural Electrification Agency. He is the Executive Director, and he will be talking on energizing food system transformation in Nigeria. Engineer Barka Sajo, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us, and
thank you.
We hope you do justice to this topic.
Hopefully.
Just recently, the federal government declared a state of emergency in the food sector, and Rural Electrification Agency saw that there is a need to step in urgently, and that's why we have this topic today, because a lot has gone into that. Engineer Sajo, first of all, can we meet you?
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and it's indeed an honor to be here to share some of my experiences and the work that we do in rural electrification. My name is Engineer Barka Sajo. I am the Executive Director, Technical Services at the REA. Just for further context, the REA is the Rural Electrification Agency, a unit of government, an agency of government under the Ministry of Power that is saddled with the responsibility of providing energy access to rural communities that are unserved and underserved.
Wow. Energy access, you said. For the layman,
Yes.
that could mean what?
So essentially, energy access is, having the ability to be able to provide power for livelihood and businesses in our communities.
Is it only through electricity that you provide power, or other sources?
Yes, so when it comes to providing energy access, traditionally we always had supply or power delivered to homes and businesses through the national grid, what we know as the NEPA supply, as we casually call it. But more recently, with innovation and technology, we have been able to do so using decentralized systems, small systems, maybe through solar, or other renewable sources of energy.
So you are tapping into several other renewable sources of energy.
Absolutely.
Moving down from that, the federal government just declared a state of emergency in the food sector.
Yes.
And of course, considering what is going on in Nigeria today,
Right.
food, though essential, has become very difficult to come by.
Yes.
And the topic today is transformation
Yes.
in the food sector.
Yes.
Now, how will this renewable energy from Rural Electrification Agency, how will it affect food supply?
Thank you. I think there's a lot of things to unpack here. So I'll try to just use a few minutes to try to do so. You mentioned the food security issue, where the government declared an emergency, and rightly so, because of course with the situation with the energy prices, we are seeing increase in food prices, which also has an influence on inflation. But this is a global. Vice President in Rome attended, where he represented the president, attended the summit for food systems. And in that room, it was a conversation around the global disruptions in food systems. So it's not just a Nigerian thing. Yes, we are actually experiencing, so much pressure in terms of increase in food prices, but this is as a result of disruptions globally. The war in Ukraine and the follow-on from COVID has put a lot of pressure in terms of food systems. So when we speak of food systems, we're talking about, a combination of issues, a kaleidoscope of issues, from the production of food to, the transport, the logistics, the processing, and then onto the consumption. So just bringing back that point home to Nigeria, with the current security situation in most of the northern part of the country, where a lot of farming goes on, and even in the southern part of the country, that has caused a lot of pressure, in terms of food production. We also know that at the end of the day, with the fuel subsidy removal, two sectors, are immediately affected the most, and that's predominantly the transport sector, and of course all of the energy supply sectors. So this in turn actually contributes to making the food security problem a major conversation.
And so, having talked about all this, what exactly is the Rural Electrification Agency doing to suppress this pressure?
Yes, thanks for that question. So the Rural Electrification Agency, when it comes to our catchment area for operation, is predominantly in the rural areas.
Yes,
and
what as the name implies.
As the name implies, yes. And what they do predominantly there is agriculture. So very recently, we have tried to repurpose public finance that we have to target in productive use of energy. One of the productive use of energy is for agro. We last year under the federal government budget deployed 6 mini grids focused on communities that are involved in agro processing. So where you have rice milling, where you have fisheries, exactly, aquaculture and all of that. So we did this in the 6 geopolitical zones, and just use one case study to be able to drive the point home. In Ijebu-Ode in Ogun, we deployed 100 kilowatts in a farm cluster where they require water, and initially they were doing this by petrol pumps. With the current subsidy removal, that has gone up significantly, and it will impact on their profit and revenues. But by the deployment of this project, we have been able to displace a lot of petrol generators in this community, and we are seeing consistent increase in revenue generation from that community and production. So we have this type of cases. In another segment of our program, we also went on to deploy solar irrigation pumps, because there's a climate side to this conversation. With the current climate change situation globally, you're seeing disruption in the cycle, the raining season cycle.
So thereby affecting the planting seasons.
Affecting the yield ultimately. So we have deployed over 1,400 pumps across many states, working with FADAMA under the Ministry of Agric to be able to provide all year farming.
So, and this deployment goes around the 6 geopolitical zones,
Absolutely.
just like the...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so far, you've been doing this. Has there been any results that you can point at practically?
Yes, absolutely. So for the irrigation pumps, again, there's cost saving in many of the farms. We shared these pumps across smallholder farmer user groups, and what we are seeing is an automatic increase in production. Yes, so increase in production and cost savings as well. Then there is also the job creation angle to it. We have been able to impact more than 8,000 farmers. And because of these successes that we have recorded with this business model, we've been able to attract some funding as well. Yes, we have.
So you have international funding now?
Absolutely, we have some funding we secured through the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, GEAP, where they've provided funding for us to be able to scale up, and we're looking at doing 25 more mini grids across various communities.
Across the 6 geopolitical zones?
Yes, the mandate requires us, the federal government mandate for electrification requires an equitable distribution for the deployment of our projects. So yes.
And from all indications, farming goes on more in the northern side of Nigeria. And if you have to distribute these things across the 6 geopolitical zones, it means that you are going to affect a particular group, like the north, where they plant all through the year, and the south has seasonal planning. Now, if you have to deploy it equally among the 6 geopolitical zones, a particular zone will be affected.
Yes, but I think I need to correct that impression a little bit, because I think when we talk about farming, we think about it from just the tilling of the ground. It's beyond that. The food system value chain includes processing. So, for example, in Ijebu-Ode, like I said, it's fish farming. In some other places, there's room for cold storage. which also is critical in the agricultural value chain. So I think at the end of the day, there's a fair share balance. Yes.
Okay, that's good to hear. And there are, from what you have said now, there are a lot of opportunities for especially the young ones,
yes,
and of course the farmers,
yes,
to grow. Recently, I was going through something on the internet, and they talked about a Chinese organization giving rice mill, a whole rice processing mill,
yes,
to a particular group of people, yes, in the northern states.
Yes.
As the energy sector, the Rural Electrification Agency, are you considering giving mills, especially big ones, that can help production and increase production? Because it's one thing, yes, to produce from the farm, right, it's another thing to be able to harvest properly, it's another thing to process properly, it's another thing to store properly. Absolutely. So on all these stages, has there been the impact of the Rural Electrification Agency?
Yes, so the way we are structured,
yes,
we try to do our programs in a way that we demonstrate and de-risk. Because of the enormity of the issues, of the problems and the needs out there, we are able to now demonstrate, which will encourage private participation. So we have a component of our program that is focused on distributing productive use. And this component encourages farmers or developers to actually provide the mills that you're talking about, grinding machines, yes, dryers, as it may be. Yes. So we provide some grant once this is deployed, so that it encourage scale up of this productive use equipment. A case in point is one of these projects that we deployed in Adamawa State, in a locality called Gorin, and that's a rice milling environment. So we have been able to deploy power, and we're looking at retrofitting even the old mills so that they are more efficient.
And then they increase
the yield and the production eventually.
Okay.
Yes.
So you have talked about the processing and the production. What
Yes,
about storage? That has been our problem in Nigeria. What is rural electrification? And of course, you play a major role in storage.
Yes.
What is the Rural Electrification Agency doing to ensure that we have adequate storage,
yes,
that we supply for off-season foods?
The one of the biggest challenges with storage is actually power.
Yes.
So, and because our work is electrification, I think we fit in very
well
nicely into that
storage
as well. So for most of the value chain, we're looking at providing constant electricity supply for storage. But we consider small storage facilities as productive use, so they also qualify for the grant under our productive use component.
Okay, I pick you up from there. You talked about grants.
Yes.
Do you have grant facilities for the
Absolutely.
The Rural Electrification Agency gives grants.
Yes.
And these grants, are they monitored so they get to the right places?
Yes. So this is where our due diligence process comes into place. And because we work with different development partners like the African Development Bank and the World Bank, we have structured programs that have a lot of prerequisites, so that developers that are competent are able to meet these requirements. Upon achieving, these requirements, they are now able to qualify to access the grant. But the key point here is the grants are predominantly performance-based. So this means, simply put, that you have to go and deliver first, and then it is monitored over a period before you can make
so
the claims.
You present what you are doing, how you have
how
delivered,
it is working before you get paid.
Oh, that's very, very nice. And going from that, there has been the issue of power supply in this nation. And of course, rural areas are there are some areas where there's no light at all.
Absolutely.
Has there been any way such areas have a lot of farmlands where most of their produce just waste away after production?
Yes.
Have you been able to catch those areas and penetrate into them in the Rural Electrification Agency?
Yes, I think that's a very important question, and I think the Vice President even touched on part of this. The work is not for us alone to do as government. We must encourage partnerships. We must encourage a scale-up of programs. But programs, in designing programs, you must establish the connection. So you have a lot of programs that are focused on agric. You have some programs that are focused on electrification. Since there's a direct linkage in these programs, bringing them together,
there has to be synergy.
Exactly, synergy. So what we try to do is to create a platform where these synergies can happen to solve this problem. just to quote some of the numbers from the Food System Summit, Nigeria has been able to attract in the last few years over $500 million. So some of the efforts will be led by the private sector. We have agricultural zones.
So we have
and
public-private
different programs.
partnership
We
now.
have some of that. We have
Okay.
private sector, purely private sector-led
Wow.
initiatives as
with
well.
support from the Rural Electrification Agency.
Yes, with
Wow.
support from the Rural Electrification Agency and other government agencies that are involved in, of course, a lot of work too led by the Ministry of Agric as well, and other government agencies that are involved in different aspects of agriculture.
Very nice to hear. And considering that the society now, we have the larger percentage of the youths
Yeah.
who are actually running away from the farm.
Yes.
Do you have any encouragement? Do you have any motivation
Yes.
to move them to the farm, especially in the area of electricity?
I think what we need to think about when we talk about the youth is that they are actually very important in the agriculture conversation.
Yes.
And once we understand the interdependencies, we see that there's a lot of room for them to play in. Everybody doesn't have to till the ground.
Yeah.
Innovation would play a role in the way we reach out to farmers in terms of distribution of fertilizers,
Seedlings.
payments, channels, So I see a lot of role for young people. And in fact, in some of the work that we are doing, we are seeing a lot of young people play a role in bringing innovation to agriculture. This is the only way we can scale up the solutions.
Engineer Salindo, thank you very
Sajo,
much. You've been
yes.
giving Sajo.
Yes.
So sorry about that.
Yes.
Thank you very much for giving us all these things. But I still have a lot of burning questions
Please.
to ask, and
Please,
I
all right.
really wish you will do some justice to it. Yes, you have talked about moving to the rural areas, identifying the areas where these problems are actually persistent. For example, you talked about Fadama, that you have been able to provide rural electrification for some Fadama farms and all others.
Right.
Now, if you have been able to provide for a few, how are you intending to work on others? Because I know the first stage
Yes.
cannot go too far.
Yes.
And of course, each of them will be expecting that since these people have gotten in the next farming season, it should get to us. Is there a program that rotates this or that moves from one stage to the other?
That's a very important question, because once we deployed that first phase of 1,000 plus pumps, we started to get a lot of requests, even from the Fadama. But what we've tried to do is, rather than personalize the ownership of the pumps, they have small subgroups, right?
Okay.
Farmer subgroups.
Okay.
So a few pumps can be allocated to the subgroup depending on the scale of farming that they carry
that they
out.
do.
But yes, there's still a need to roll out a few more, especially with the increase in energy prices in Nigeria. We are hearing that because it's a free market, it will continue to grow. So I think solar pumps will play a very big role in trying to ensure that we do not suffer losses in our production.
And so far, the way you have been talking, it looks like everything has been so smooth. You've been moving.
Absolutely not, no.
And now,
Absolutely
what
not.
are the challenges?
I think the biggest challenge, and I would speak broadly on this without maybe going into too much specifics, but from the feedback, some of the challenges that we've had with the business models, has been on security. I think that's the top issue. And this is one of the reasons why the president in his wisdom declared a state of emergency, because there's a nexus between security and food production. So security has been one of the major issues. I think access to credit for farmers is also an issue.
Because of the high interest rates.
Certainly, the interest rate has recently gone up to 18.75%.
Even before 18.75, it was high.
It was, so that's another area that needs to be looked at. But like I said initially, programs need to be designed in a way where they are granular and they also create synergies. So in one conversation, you can be addressing agriculture and you can also address energy access.
Now, since you have talked about some of these problems, you have talked about the challenges, how were you able to surmount the ones you've been able to surmount?
Yeah, so we haven't surmounted all the problems, I must be honest with you. However, in the deployment of the pumps, I noticed that we actually recorded some successes by providing solar street lights in the farms. So in the southeast, we got very direct feedback from some of the farmers saying, because of the street lights, so not just distributing the pumps, we installed street lights in some of the remote farms.
So they won't be stolen at night.
They won't be stolen at night. One, they can work longer hours, and you know how light just chases darkness away. So it has actually helped a bit. I think that's something we are looking to sustain in future programs.
So with the production of street lights and farmers being able to work longer hours, some of these things are sustained. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, they are sustained, and even women feel safer to stay longer hours in the farms. Most of the farms, from the numbers we are seeing, we see that in most of our rural communities, women actually do most of the work. Yeah, so but one of the major setbacks is the issue of security.
Now you talked about solar. This solar energy, from what we understand, is that it may not be able to power things that are too strong. I'm not an engineer, so the technical terms I may not understand them. So the question is, with provision of solar energy in the farm to power, especially the engine that runs the water. How have you been able to do that? What is the possibility? How durable is it, so to say?
We get that a lot, and I think it's with any new thing, people have their misconceptions and all of that. From a technical standpoint, solar can power about anything.
Wow.
Yeah, so we have large solar farms that are even currently powering universities under our Energizing Education program.
A whole institution?
Absolutely. Wow. We've been able to power a few universities. It's in its second phase, and then the third phase is also on the way. So to answer your question, solar is able to power most of these things. The only thing is we try to do that efficiently. Some of the equipment that we use need to be retrofitted and made more energy efficient.
In your own technical way, would you advise that Nigerians go for solar instead of the grid, mounting pressure on the electricity grid?
I think they are complementary. Yes, depending on the most cost-effective option and the more expedient one. In some locations, deploying a decentralized solar system is the most effective option. In some locations, extending the line and providing a transformer is actually the most expedient. So both of them are complementary.
So thank you very much, Engineer Baka Sajo. It's really been nice having you. But finally, before we leave the program, I'd like you to just give a word to the society. The times are hard, and we really need to hear something that can douse the tension. Just a word to the society from the Rural Electrification Agency.
I think thanks again for the opportunity. I would continue to be the agency that will be pro-poor, looking at ways that our programs will speak to alleviate the economic pressures of Nigerians. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Baka.
Thanks for having me.
We hope to see you more often, because there are still a lot of things we want to discuss with you.
I really
and of course,
being here.
if we have so many of it, we may not be sending the right message. So we're breaking it in bits. Soon we'll bring you again to talk about other things on Abuja City Television Online. It's been Engineer Baka Sajo in the last 30 minutes, and it's been Yetunde Yemi Bangbushi, your anchor person, and I want to tell you that you will still see more of Engineer Sajo in this place, and others who will be talking about different segments. You've heard about how the REA has been working on food transformation. You've heard about the parts they have played in the emergency of the food sector. So as time goes on, all those things will begin to show itself. They are still, most of them have just started, and they are growing. Well, thank you very, very much for joining us, and thank you to the media crew for a job well done, and thank you to the MD, Mr. Folushoju, for being in the studio. He's with Engineer Sajo. It's nice being with you. Join us again on Monday for a fresh edition.